Hello, everyone. Apologies for the delayed start. Welcome, and thank you for attending today's IBM Middleware User Community Ask the Expert session. My name is Kelsey Lammers, and I'll be hosting today's webcast. Our topic for today is setting up reports for Tivoli Network Manager 4.1.1 and 4.2. All phone lines are currently in listen-only mode. There will be a question and answer session towards the end of the presentation. However, you may ask a question at any time during the presentation using the questions window located in the control panel. Tomorrow, we will have the recording and slides of today's presentation available on the IBM Middleware User Community website for you to access. You'll receive a follow-up email with a link to those archives. Now I'd like to introduce our speaker for today. We have joining us Jerry Swan. He's an advisory software engineer at IBM supporting the Tivoli Network Manager product. Thank you, Jerry, for joining us today. The floor is now yours.
Hello, everybody. Apologies for the late start. Had some technical issues. Hopefully everybody can see my screen okay.
Looks great.
All righty, so let's get started. We're going to be talking about installing reports on Tivoli Network Manager 4.1.1 and 4.2. Going to do as soon as I get the slide to move forward. There we go. We're going to be talking about managing prereqs for the 4.2 installation. We're going to go through an installation in some slide decks, and then we're going to talk about some post-installation problems that I've seen and some problem areas that you might run into after you get it installed. So the first thing, what's new in 4.2, this is our first release that ITNM is used, or we're doing sole install through Installation Manager. So we will be installing this through Installation Manager. It's going to be a basic generic install using the DB2 database. What else is new in 4.2? The BIRT reports are no longer being used with ITNM. Previous releases we had both BIRT and Cognos, and now we're just going to be using the Cognos reports. Also, all of our reporting data is now stored in the INSIM database. Previously, we stored in INSIM as well as in TDW if you wanted to configure it that way. For the 4.2 installation, here are the products that we use that are compatible with it. Omnibus 7.4 or 8.1, excuse me, FixPack 5, please. WebGUI, FixPack 4, WebSphere, Jazz and Dash, and then what we're going to be going through the install for here is going to be TCR 3.1.2.1. Also, it's compatible with ITNCM 6.4.2 and ITM 6.3 FixPack 2. Don't forget, you'll also need that prerequisite scanner to make sure that your system is up to speed with the installation scenario. Products that we're compatible with, or I'm sorry, with OSs that we're compatible with is Red Hat 6 and 7, SUSE 11, FixPack 2 or FixPack 3, and AIX 6.1 and 7.1. Browsers, Internet Explorer 10 and 11, and Mozilla Firefox 38 extended support or later seems to work fine. Before you proceed with the install, the first thing you need to do is run the prereq checker against TCR. That seemed to be one of the main problems that I saw, was that there are a couple of requirements for TCR in a Linux install that weren't installed on my box. And this is after I'd already installed all the other products like WebSphere and ITNM and Jazz. So before you can start your TCR and your ITNM reports install, you would need to run this prereq checker on TCR and then fix any failing issues before you start the install. Also, another thing that you need to do before you install is that the TCR reporting services install requires a copy of the Cognos installer to be on the box, unzipped, and in a location that you remember, so that when you go to the install, it's going to ask you in one of the screen dialogues where this installer is. We'll show you a little bit later in one of the slides. There's also a link here for the download instructions on how to acquire this this Cognos installer. All right, so let's just move right on to the install. So you'll crank up the installation manager. Here I'm doing a GUI install. This can be done via command line as well. All right, when you go into the install packages, once you've got your all your preferences set up as far as the locations where you're getting the packages from, the first option you're going to choose to install is reporting services, version 3.1.2.1, and then you're also going to choose network manager reports, version 4.2. Both of these are available on that first screen there. You just have to scroll down for the network manager reports. Then you want to choose next, and then you're going to accept the license agreement. And then I'm going to go through the dialog of the installation. So here it's asking you or telling you what's going to be installed. The next slide, in this particular slide, you can choose if you have a different installation scenario than the basic. You can go in and choose, for example, to uncheck configuration of the schema if the schema has already been installed elsewhere. And that schema basically is a TCR database, the content store database. This is only, like I said, this is only if required. A typical first-time install, this is not necessary to do. I just wanted to show you that screen. All right, so now we're going into configuring the features. The first panel, it's going to ask you for the WebSphere installation credentials. Mine is a plain Jane installation, so SMAdmin is what I was using. And you want to put that password in there, and you want to click on the validate to make sure that he's able to talk to WebSphere. If something's wrong, such as WebSphere is down or something like that, then you may get a failure here, so you'll need to correct it and then start back over again. All right, so the next step would be putting in the information for the TCR database, the content store database. This one right here, this is a slide that has given a few problems before, so I'll talk about it a little bit later. But what you're going to use here is whatever instance you are using. If it's a local install, you want to select the DB2 instance from the pull down. You want to choose the option of whether to create a database, and this is going to be the TCR-DB, or if there's an existing one there, to use the existing. And then here you want to use the username and password of the user that's installing the product. In my case, it's Netcool, so you would change that to Netcool and put in the Netcool password. And then you want to put in the port, whatever port the database is listening on. Here you want to test the connection, and if it all passes, then you'll get to the next slide or the next prompt. If it doesn't pass, you'll get an error message somewhere that explains what the error is, and you'll need to correct it. And then here is the portion that I talked about earlier about the Cognos installer, where it needs to be unzipped and placed in the path. In this, you would put the path of the location of where this file is, and it's going to ask you to validate it once it's finished. And all you're going to need to do is point to the TCR Cognos folder that's unzipped in that image, and it'll once it's validated, it'll let you move on to the next stage. Now we're going to get into, since we're installing ITNM Network Manager reports as well in this, now we're getting to the dialog for that. What it's going to ask for is where it wants to be installed, which it's going to default to here. It's going to find this path by default. If it's not where you have it, then you're going to want to browse and change that. And then you want to use the JAZ-SM user credentials. Once you've got that set, it'll allow you to move to the next panel. And then here is where we're actually configuring the topology database that's being used for the reports. This is going to be the NSIM database that you installed when you installed ITNM. So the credentials that you'll use will be for that particular database. So if the instance name is ITNM, then you would actually put ITNM in there instead of NSIM. But as you can see, I chose NSIM. I put the host name in, the server port, and then the user and password that is used to access that database. You can choose either DB2 or Oracle. I've chosen DB2. And now you're ready to install. The steps are fairly simple if you're doing a straight install with taking all the defaults. And once you get to the install dialog, it's probably about a 30 or 40 minute install that'll take place. And then once you're done, it's all installed and ready to go. So now, as far as post-installation goes, if you were using Oracle, there will be an extra step or two, and I'll show you that. Also, there are situations where reporting services may be installed on a different server, which is not the default install. There are also instances where reporting services was already installed previously, where you didn't do both of them at the same time, and I'll show you how to work through that. Also, there are a couple of errors that I ran into during install, and I'll show you how I overcame that one. And then a couple of problems accessing reports afterwards. And then I'll talk about what happened to TDW. All right, so for the Oracle database, after you've gone through the dialog and installed it, if you're using Oracle instead of DB2, there is one step that needs to be run. It seems like a minor step. It's just putting in a jar file in the correct folder in JAS. In the reporting folders path. The easiest way to accomplish it is just go ahead and just run a config TCR. Config TCR is in our documentation. It's a script that's used to configure TCR, ITNM's reports for TCR. And just use it with the NSIM database password, and then you want to use the JAS administrator password, and then do an install, and then give it the location of the JAS SM home. And obviously, all those need to be specific to your environment. All right, so here are a few links that I want to give you about if you're doing something different than installing the base installation. If there's an existing reporting services installed, then you'll need to follow that first link there. If you're doing a distributed reporting, which is basically a different server for a different server than the ITNM server is installed on, then you want to follow that second link. If for some reason down the road you've moved your database or the password is changed, etc., there is another link there that'll show you what you need to do that, to change that information so that the reports will continue to work. And then there's the config TCR documentation that basically that gives you all the parameters that you can use for config TCR and what it's used for. Now, the one main error that I ran into during the installation, it happened rather quickly after I clicked on the install button. I got a post-install configure failure, and this basically is, it happens in a non-root install, and it happens within 10 or 15 seconds after, or maybe half a minute after you start the install, and you'll get a failure. And what is basically happening is that the content store database step is failing. And what needs to happen is in the tech note that you see below there, basically you have to ensure that you're using the correct user to install with, which would be the netcool user, that you put the credentials for the netcool user in that tab, and also that you you clean up some files in the temp directory. and then you should be able to run it if you reattempt. You should be able to get it to install. We haven't seen this fixed in every scenario. As a matter of fact, there's still a couple of problems out there in a non-root install that are still being worked on and looked at by the TCR level 2 and level 3 teams. So hopefully we'll get all this ironed out before you get it installed. If you're running any problems, just open a PMR and we'll see if we can get you some help. All right, another problem that I saw after I got this installed, I was attempting to log in the Dash and run my reports as the ITNM login user. And you can see at the top there I have ITNM as the user, and when you open up reports, you get an access is denied message. And what needs to happen with that is you go to that URL that I have at the top of this page, and it leads you through a step of configuration changes that needs to happen. You would log back in as the SM admin user and then launch a report, and then you would go into the administration dialog and make a couple of changes. You basically need to add some roles and permissions to the ITNM admin user or any other user that you want to be able to run reports. Make that available for them to be able to run reports, and then you'll be able to run them. And here you'll see there's all the reports. After I was able to log in with ITNM admin, I'm able to get to the reports and run them. All right, so for 4.2, what happened to TDW? Well, TDW, we stopped using it for storing report or poll data in 4.2. So we don't transfer the data anymore using the KNP or NP agent through the ITM mechanism that gets it over to TDW. We will store all the data using Apache Storm in the NC poll data database within NSIM. There's a link there at the bottom of the page there that will give you some more information about this. It's pretty cool change in how we do things. You can do a lot more from like the icon in the GUI, right-click it and get various bits of data about that specific device from the GUI as opposed to just going into the reports. I know we had some reports that we could run from the right-click tools before, but this will give you a little bit more granularity and flexibility. And here is a page on report reference. This will give you an idea of what each report will do, and it will also let you know what poll policies you need to have enabled so that the report will run. I would say it's 100% accurate, but there may be one or two things that have changed or that may be different than before. Okay, so for 4.2, I'm ready to take any questions. If anybody has anything, let me look and see if I see any questions here. I'm not seeing any questions, so let's see. I'll move on. Now
it looks like there's one in there.
There is one. Let's see.
Just came through.
Oh, there we go. Okay, I have one query. Due to some reason, we install TCR and JAS with tip admin instead of SM admin user while accessing common reporting. It is giving access denied error. Please help me on this. Okay, that should probably be covered by that last URL that I pulled up. No, not that one. This one here, VJ. This one should probably fix you up. You'll need to go in and make sure that that user, the tip admin user, has the roles and privileges to run reports. Any other questions? All right, we will move on to the 4.1.1. All right, 4.1.1, as you can see, the 4.2 was fairly simple and easy to install. The 4.1.1 is a little bit different. There are a few different scenarios that we didn't offer a complete integration for, and so therefore it required a little bit more work on your end to do the installs. So with 4.1.1, you can complete it using config TCR script that we provide on certain situations. Typically, if you were installing NOI 131, you typically had to install this manually. In other words, you had to run the commands to copy over files and create data sources manually. And then with the 4.1.1, it still used the TDW. You could use the TDW as a storing option for your pull data. All right, so some of the scenarios for 4.1.1. 4.1.1 was provided as a standalone install or as an implementation with NOI 1.3. There are some architectural differences in how 4.1.1, as far as how it matches up with the GUI portion, Omnibus Web GUI. And so for that reason, 4.1.1 and its tip server would have to reside on a different box than if you had Omnibus 8.1 installed in your environment. Another implementation scenario is that with TCR 2.1.1, it does not install or is not supported on Red Hat 6 without a lot of work, and so we just didn't support it on Red Hat 6. And because of the things above there, most of those installs required a manual install and configuration of the ITNM reports. And we'll just kind of go through some of those stuff, a basics scenario of how to do that. I'll do it for both Oracle and DB2. All right, so ITNM 4.1 did not come with the TCR in the install package. Previous versions, 3.9 and 3.8 did. So with 4.1, you'll have to install that. Any TCR that you use, you'll have to install separately. That includes 3.1.1 and 3.1.2 or 2.1.1. If you had a single server install with like Web GUI 7.4, in other words, where ITNM can be installed all on the same box, then you could install the reports without a lot of configuration. The configuration would actually take place during the install, or you could go back later and run the launchpad and run the config TCR script. If TCR is installed after ITNM, and if they were installed on the same server, you could use config TCR script. For those steps, you'll see the URL below. That will explain how you need to do the install. It's a basic, either the launchpad using of configuring the reports, or going to the command line and running config TCR with the proper parameters. So I think that's a duplicate. If ITNM GUI and TCR are installed on the same server, then running the config TCR or using the launchpad can be used to implement it. But if the installation is distributed, meaning that you've got ITNM on one server and then you've got TCR server or TCR GUI on a different server or on separate machines, then you'll have to manually configure this. If you try to use a config TCR, most likely it will fail. You'll have to do some manual configuration, if not complete manual configuration, to get this to work. So the manual configuration steps, there are several, but if you break it down, it's fairly simple to do. So you'll have to copy some files from the ITNM install media or from the installed ITNM GUI server, ITNM Cognos zip, ITNM report zips. There are some jar files for DB2 and Oracle that need to be copied. You'll need the database server hostname and login credentials for your INSIM database and TDW if you're using TDW, and you'll need a database client installed that will communicate to the databases that you have. So the manual configuration steps, I'll just walk through it real quickly here. Here are some sample commands. Most of these will be sample commands that you can use. First thing you want to do is import the ITNM reports and the ITNM Cognos zip files into your TCR server configuration. These are going to be done on the TCR server, by the way. So copy the files to the TCR server and then run this command. Wherever you put those files, you need to just run this command to change your path. And then you're going to need to copy the jar files from ITNM to your TCR server and then put those in the path that you see there on the screen. For Oracle, there's a OJDBC6, and for DB2 is db2jcc.jar and db2jcc_license.jar. Now you want to make sure that, in this case we're using Jazz for an example, so you want to make sure that Jazz has access or has database client access. So make sure that the database client's installed, the database is cataloged for DB2. Ensure that you have DB2 access. So in this example, you would source your DB2 profile for wherever the instance that you have, and then DB2 connect to NSIM user NSIM using NCI as cool to check and make sure that you can connect to the database. A good place that you can source your DB2 profile is in the setup command line.sh file that is in the Jazz Home Profile bin folder. You can also put that in your user's bash profile or profile file. Just understand that when Jazz comes up and starts, he needs to have access to this. So he'll need this in his profile. So however you want it, the best way for your environment to do it is how you want to do this. For Oracle, you're going to copy the Oracle Instant Client 11.1 folder from the ITNM GUI server. 11.1 is a 32-bit client, and this is what you'll need. By the way, 32-bit client is what you'll need for both of these, for DB2 and Oracle. So something you can do is export the load library path that you see here, and then you can actually connect SQL Plus to your lab machine. And if you can connect and get the SQL Plus prompt, then you know you're good to go. And what you'd want to do is you'd want to add this load library path to the setup command line.sh script, just as you did the DB2, or you can put it in your profile, just like I talked about before. All right, so after you've confirmed that you've got client access, and after you've placed the environment variables correctly in a file so that Jazz has access to it, you can restart Jazz. One common thing about Jazz is that after it comes up, it still takes a few minutes before TCR is actually up and ready to accept commands. In other words, trcommand.sh does not work for a few minutes after Jazz has told you that it's up and ready and running, So what I typically do is I'll look for that message dpr-sys-6000 in the cog server log. And once I see that message, I know that I'm okay, that I can actually start issuing TR commands. And you'll need to issue these commands so that you can configure the data sources in these next few slides. So in a typical configuration for me, when I do the BIRT and Cognos reports, when I do the BIRT reports, I'll configure using the device availability summary report, because that one allows me to configure the NSIM parameters and NC poll data databases. I'll need to issue at least 3 commands to do this with, possibly a 4th command if I'm using TDW. And all I need to do is just one report, and all the other reports will take on the characteristics of the one that you configure. That's just how it works. So here are an example of the 3 commands that I would typically use. You'll see that I referenced that device availability summary report. And again, this is, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, this is for Oracle. If a word of caution to you, these commands are, they have to be syntactically correct, or they won't really error, they'll just run. And if they're not correct, you will have some issues with connectivity or not being able to run reports. I apologize, I wasn't able to get these commands to translate very well in this medium. If you want to send me an email, I can send you the actual commands. This is all on one line, and you can see at the end of the first line there's a dash there by itself, and it should be in front of data sources, but I couldn't get this to show correctly no matter what I did. But at any rate, you'll run those 3 commands to set up the BIRT reports, and this is for Oracle. The SID here that I have is ORCL, and you'll need the Oracle user's username and password, and you'll need the SM admin username and password to set this up. You do one data source for NSIM, one for NC poll data, and one for parameters. Notice that NC poll data and parameters, in my case, are configured to use the same Oracle username, NC poll data. This is dependent upon your installation and how you're using it. Yours may be different. But in most cases, and how I always explain it, in most cases, parameters and NC poll data for Oracle use the same user to get into the Oracle database. Okay, once you've got the BIRT reports configured, then you can configure the Cognos reports. These are the sample commands to use. Not a whole lot explaining here to do. Just basically what you need to understand is that the syntax is important here. If you don't get this right, there's typically not an error. It just, when you try to connect, you'll get some errors about connection. So I'll go through a little bit of what to do when you aren't seeing what you need to see. And there are several commands, if you look at the TCR reference, that will help you figure out how to list the database, list the connections, list the data sources, etc. That may help you. All right, so that's all you needed to do. Let me back up here. That's all you needed to do for the Oracle database. Once you've done those steps, it's configured. So for DB2, everything is the same as far as getting your JAS server up and running. Once you get it running with the correct environmental parameters, you can configure the BIRT reports for DB2. So once you've restarted your JAS server, you can now run basically the same commands to configure BIRT as you did for Oracle. There's just a different driver and a little bit of different syntax when you do this, and you'll do the same thing. You'll do 3 commands, one for NSIM, one for parameters, and one for NC poll data, and then you'll do a 4th if it's TDW. The 4th one for TDW basically replaces the configuration option for NC poll data that you see here at the bottom. Now, if you'll notice for DB2, I'm using the same user to get into the DB2. I'm just using the DB2 instance client information, client configuration or parameters to get in. And again, syntax is important. And then the same thing for configuring the Cognos for DB2. Now, here I'll go a little bit deeper into the TDW configuration. If you're using TDW to store your data, which means that you've configured the NP agent KNP to forward NC poll data from the NSIM database into the TDW database, then you will need to run an extra command respective to Oracle or DB2 to set up the data source so that the poll data information can be pulled from the TDW database. So here you see the first command is for DB2 and the second one is for Oracle. What's changed is instead of INSIM, we're talking now to warehouse. Schema is an ITM user, and you're using the login credentials for the TDW database. This also entails is that when you have TDW in the mix, that you'll have to make sure that you can talk to the TDW database as well. So make sure your clients are able to talk to the TDW database, and as well as JAS. Okay, so after you've run the commands to configure BIRT, there are a few problems that you may or may not see. I've given a couple of URLs. The first one is you'll have been successful in running a couple of BIRT reports, and then all of a sudden you'll get an error message when you attempt to run more BIRT reports. That's a problem with a WebSphere configuration that you can change. That URL will walk you through the steps to make that change. Once you do that, you'll be able to run the BIRT reports again. The second one is a problem with TR command. It may give you a CTGTTRQ010E error message when you're trying to run the commands to configure the data sources. There could be several reasons for this. You could be running out of memory. You'll have to pay attention to the error messages, but the most common one is in that URL there. I forget what the actual fix was, but follow that URL and try your command again. And then there's obviously we get a lot of PMRs for the main drop-down box being blank, and that typically means that the parameters data source is incorrectly configured. I think I put correctly here, but it's not correctly configured. So check for typos in that command. One way that you can do that, I think I've got it on the next slide here, is you can list the report's parameters to show how it's configured. And I've got this. So here's a command that you can run to list a specific report. And all you'd have to do is list one of them or you can list the one that you're trying to run. But the one that I show here is a router health summary report. Here's some of the sample output from running that list command from the command line. And what you'll see is it'll tell you the data source for parameters, and it'll actually give you, it won't give you the password, but it'll give you the user ID that you configured for it. And this is where you need to check and make sure that you've got the JDBC driver correct, that you've got the right host name correct, and parameters such as the port that it's listening to, schema, instance, etc. If you see a problem here, then you'll need to rerun the command to configure the parameters data source for BIRT reports. And the same thing goes for the NC poll data. If you're talking to a TDW database, then it should reflect in the output of that command that it's configured to talk to the TDW database. If that's not the case, then you need to fix this. All right, so here is the same report reference that for 4.1.1 as I gave you for 4.2 earlier. That will give you an idea of what reports you need to be, what polls you need to have enabled to run a specific report. And I believe that is all. So I'm ready to take some more questions.
Okay. We'll now open it up for questions. If you'd like to ask a question, please do so using that questions window located in the dashboard panel. Jerry, it looks like there's one in there from Satash. Did you get to that?
Satish, okay.
Yeah.
His question is, I've seen issue that after installing the TCR, if we are accessing the T-common reporting, it again asking for user credential. Could you clarify that a little bit for me? While I'm waiting, Dennis, I think I'd answered that earlier. As far as BIRT reports for 4.2, no, there are no BIRT reports in 4.2. They're all Cognos. All right, and Satish, are you talking about 4.1.1 or 4.2? 4.2. I have not seen that. If you could maybe get with me after the session, we can try to iron that out and see what's going on with it. Thank you. And I think I saw one from VJ earlier, a follow-up. You don't have an SM admin user. Whatever user you're using to get into, VJ, whatever user you're using to get into the JAS panel, you should be able to, one of those users has the role of, I think it's like TCR portal operator or something like that. Whichever user that is should be able to get into reports and launch that. If not, I'm not sure what that could be. Probably have to open a PMR with the TCR team to figure out how best to work around that. Any other questions?
Oh, I did receive a couple questions. Sorry, beforehand. Someone sent an email and said, are there any load concerns when running Reporter on the same server as ITNM 4.2?
None that we're aware of, no. If you've got it, if you've got your system size per the minimum requirements for like a medium size environment, I mean, if you have a large environment that you're pushing the envelope, then that may be a problem. But we haven't seen this yet. Did you have another one, Kelsey?
Yeah, let's see. Are there out-of-the-box reporting for MQ series and message broker? Are there filters for queue manager names?
Yeah, that one, those I don't know the answer to. That somebody that would support that MQ series might. Dennis, you have a follow-up. I have some Cognos reports that work and some that throw the SQL 0204 in table name is an undefined name. That may be a good idea, is to try a couple of the TR commands that would list that particular report and see if you have everything set. Another thing that I would check is to make sure that you have the correct polling storing data. So you have to enable reports and you have to tell it to store data. For, you know, there's specific parts of data that need to get down to the database before the report will work. That could be it as well.
Okay, I do have another question. It says, what steps or details does ITNM go through during a full discovery? What is the difference between a full and partial discovery?
So a full discovery will go through the configuration that you've issued it as far as the scope and the agents that you've enabled. The partial rediscovery, it basically used if you've run a full discovery and you have a device that you want to add, and you can configure your partial rediscovery to use different agents or not use all the agents, or you may even need to add a scope to add this new device. But the partial rediscovery will just go look at what you're after. In other words, if you have a device that you want to seed it with, it'll just go look at that and then add that into your current discovery data model. Joseph Malone, what's the best way to update the data model for ITNM reports? What Cognos tools are needed? I haven't gone too deeply into that. I think the Cognos tool that that comes with TCR is all you need. But I will look into that a little bit more deeply and see if I can find something for you, Joseph.
Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions coming through.
Great. All right, everybody, thank you for joining. I appreciate it. I apologize for the tardiness, but I'm glad I was able to help out some of you guys.
Okay, thanks, Jerry, and thanks everyone for attending today's webcast. Feel free to continue any discussions in the Optimizing IT and Service Management discussion forum on the IBM Middleware User Community website. I put the link in your chat box right now. Again, the recording and slides will be available tomorrow in our webcast archives. You'll receive a follow-up email with a link to those. As you exit, please take a few moments to fill out the post-event survey. This helps us improve future events. We truly appreciate your feedback, and this concludes today's event. Thank you all, and have a fantastic day.